I always tell everybody the most important thing we have in this building are our players. And if you don't know that and you don't believe in that, then you can't work at Texas Tech. And so I brought that with me, here. We're very player focused and centered in every aspect of their life, and trying to help them become better men and deal with the situations they deal with, and help them become better football players. A better man usually can get them to be a better football faster, so helping them to grow.
Yeah.
And we try to do it at Cedar Hill, and so we were able to bring that. And I could see there were so many similarities with Coach Rule, what he was doing at Baylor and what I was doing at Cedar Hill, that it helped me know that it could work at this level.
Absolutely.
And so it just reinforced the things that I believed in.
Anybody involved with the quarterback position, it's time to lock in. This is NFL caliber coaching on your phone. Quarterback development is the key in winning football. The coolest thing is if you're a team, you can put your own terminology in here so your quarterback is learning your stuff, not my stuff or anybody else's. If you're not using this, I guarantee you somebody you're playing is.
Get your team on the same page. Start stacking the wins. Get started with Crucible today at crucibletech.com/register.
Welcome to Inside the Headset, presented by CoachComm. Each episode pulls back the curtain on the coaching profession, spotlighting voices from every level of the game and offering lessons and insights for your own path. But first, a word from CoachComm.
When the game's on the line, your play call can mean the difference between winning and losing. Don't let poor communication cost you the game. For 35 years, CoachComm has been the trusted leader in coaching communication, delivering solutions with unmatched sound quality, performance, and durability. That's why thousands of coaches in high schools across the country trust CoachComm. You put in the hours to prepare. Make sure your communication delivers when it counts. CoachComm, giving coaches the ultimate competitive edge. Visit CoachComm.com to learn more.
Follow Inside the Headset on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to our YouTube channel for exclusive content. Now, let's get inside the headset.
Coach McGuire, how we doing?
Doing good, man. It's great to see you, bro.
Yeah, it's always good to see you, and definitely awesome to kind of see you in this capacity because, I've known you for years, kind of recruiting that Dallas-Fort Worth area when I was back in it, and you were over at Cedar Hill, and a lot of this stuff as I kind of dug into your bio, I didn't know your start and all that kind of stuff. So let's dive in. Let's talk a little bit of your coaching journey. And the first question we always ask is kind of, what was that moment that you knew you wanted to be a part of this great profession?
That's a good question. I always laugh because it took my mom 30 years. About 2 years ago in my kitchen here in Lubbock, Texas, she said, "Well, I guess you did make the right decision." So I was going to school. I wanted to be a CRNA. I wanted to be a nurse and then go to school for anesthetist school. And I was literally getting ready to start my hospital rotations in nursing school. And my dad in Crowley, Texas, my dad at that time was Coach McGuire. He wasn't a coach by profession, but man, he coached everybody in every sport. He coached me in baseball, basketball, football, everything. And then he turned around and coached my sister, who's 3 years younger than me, and everything. And then we had cousins that were 10 years younger than me and 7 and him, and he coached them and everything. And, he literally, in all the little league sports, everybody knew him as Coach McGuire. And I was helping him during the summer, getting ready to go into that fall semester. And I'd never been more happy in my life. And I just kept going home. I was going to summer school, but I kept going home going, man, this is what I really need to be doing.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, I went into my mom and dad's kitchen, and I told my mom's a nurse, my uncles, aunts. I mean, I have a lot of people in the medical field, most nurses. And I told my mom, I said, "Mom, I'm going to change my major. I'm going to be a coach. I'm going to teach and coach." And she goes, "You are stupid." Like, she literally said, you are making the biggest mistake of your life. And I said, "Well, I don't want to feel like I'm ever going to work. I want to feel have a joy about what I do every day. And I know coaching will do that for me." And so I went in to my advisor and said, "Hey, I want to change up my major," and did, changed it up and got really fortunate. It's still a crazy path, because I graduated and, didn't have a coaching and teaching job.
Yeah.
So it was still a crazy path of getting where I was going.
And yeah, you led me right to kind of that next question is, regardless, obviously we look at you now and you're sitting there with the awesome logo and all those kind of things. But like that point in time, you didn't know anybody. Your dad was a part of the coaching deal, but he was doing it at the youth level. So you didn't have a dad to, patch you up with anybody or anything like that. So how did you kind of make that first connection to Crowley to get your foot in the door and start this thing?
Well, as you know, I'm from Crowley. So whenever I graduated, I didn't go the traditional route of, going, my degree's not in education.
Yeah.
I didn't get certification. And so I had to go through the alternative certification. So I'm substituting at Crowley at every level. Man, I did kindergarten all the way to senior English.
Yeah.
I'm substituting there every day. I'm driving 45 minutes a day because we were living in Midlothian, but I knew that I could get a substitute job every day. And I'm going through that and registering for the alternative certification. And they had a teacher that had a pretty severe illness that was she taught U.S. history. And I have because of just different things in my education background. I have a minor in biology and I have a minor in history. And so I had enough hours in history to get emergency certification. And so the dean of instruction actually was my English teacher. And she comes to me, she says, "Hey, Joey, there's an opportunity and we could pay you a full-time salary for the second semester versus the sub salaries or the sub pay if you'll take this job." And I was like, I'm all in. And so the second semester, once I graduated, that I started my career in January, and it lucked out that teacher had the last period off, which was athletic. And I went to the head coach, and I didn't know him, but I knew some of the coaches, and I said, "Hey, I have this period off. I'd love to just come watch off season and observe. This is what I want to do." And he said, "Well, listen, you're a full-time employee. We can use you." So he goes, "We're going to put you to work." And so I ended up becoming Brad McComb, who's he's a defense coordinator at Alito. I became his assistant in powerlifting. I helped during spring. The defensive end coach actually was my coach in high school, one of my coaches in high school. And so I was able to help him. And so at the end of that semester, Coach Wood said, "Hey, listen, I do not have a job for you." And I said, "Coach, I have to be here anyway because part of the certification is you have to have a full-time job." And they went ahead and signed me on into that position. And so just teaching, I said, "So I'm going to be here anyway, so I'll volunteer." And he said, "Well, you're, again, in the state of Texas, you got to be a full-time employee to do that." And he said, "You're good. You're eligible to do it. We're getting ready. We're at a teacher in service, getting ready for school to start. We've already started 2-a-days." And he comes to me and he says, "Hey, you need to go over to the administration building and sign a dual contract because one of the coaches didn't finish his certification and I'm putting you in that spot." And that's how it started. I was assistant offensive line coach, tight ends coach, and man, it was incredible. I mean, I was going to be there anyway, but it was incredible to get started that way. So I spent 2.5 years coaching at Crowley, coaching in my alma mater.
What an awesome story. Especially like I said, I just didn't know all this about you prior to doing this research. And now I have to ask. Now, obviously, you got the excitement about the profession from doing this youth thing, where it's so pure, man. It's guys running up to you asking how to put on a chin strap. It's all those little things that are easy to appreciate, and regardless of the time frame, some of these jobs can be difficult at times and demanding and all those kind of things. What were some of the realities you faced in those first couple of years where you had a good opportunity to grow?
No, I got really fortunate. I coached for Robert Wood. He grew up in the profession in the Plano High was part of 4 state championships, 2 in the 70s, 2 in the 80s. And then he went to Wilmer Hutchins to be the head coach of Wilmer Hutchins, won the state championship in 1990. And then he went to Crowley a few years after that. And, you know, I've been really fortunate. I've worked for, you know, I've only really worked for 3 people, Coach Wood, Coach Rule, and Coach Aranda. And, man, I've been really fortunate, to work for guys that were really giving and don't have egos. And, I learned so much with Coach Wood. He was one of these guys, you know, I found out really early in my career I wanted to be a head coach. My first full season, I was the freshman baseball coach. And, I fell in love with making the schedule for practice. You know, we were able to set up the schedule, the busing, everything that you would do. And I just fell in love with that part of the game. And so I went to Coach Wood, and after my second year, we had lost the coach, and he was getting ready to hire one. And I said, Coach, if you, are good with it, I would love to move to the outside linebackers just to learn more about the game. And he was really, you know, awesome about that. I mean, I moved with him 9 years. I coached 5 different positions for him just to try to learn the game, you know, not the offensive side or the defensive side, just the entire game. And he was really good about doing that, you know. And so I was really fortunate to work with a guy, a great mentor. And man, he's a Hall of Fame. He's in the Hall of Honor, you know, the CHSCA. Absolutely incredible person, absolutely incredible coach. And I was really fortunate to work. The guy, detail-wise, I've never been around a person more detailed in my life. Whenever we would do our Saturday breakdown on film, I learned real quick to make sure I wrote everything down on a different notepad of different things I was breaking down, because on Sunday, we started Sunday, every Sunday at 2 o'clock. We let everybody go to church or spend time with their family. But at 2 o'clock, when you walked in, there was a folder on your desk with all the stuff that you turned into him on your breakdown. And, you know, this is back in 1994, 95, and you're handwriting everything, you know, and putting in scout reports. And, he would have little pink sticky notes on your breakdown saying, where did you see this? Literally, I'll never forget, he said, the quarterback did not reverse out on this play. He faced out. Where did you see the reverse out?
Oh, man.
And, like, if you didn't make your notes of where, like, all the little things like that, now you had to go all the way back and rewatch everything. And so just the level of detail that man coached at, I learned so much from him.
Well, obviously, when you're able to kind of get those guys early on, that's awesome. In '97, you take the opportunity to move over to Cedar Hill, which ends up being a very special place for you. What led to that transition?
Man, that was a faith move, and there was many times in the 6 years that I was an assistant, I was questioning, was that the right move? So Brad McComb, who I've mentioned before, he got the Crowley job because Coach Wood took the Cedar Hill job, and Coach Woods asked me to interview at Cedar Hill, and Brad, I'm 26 years old, and Brad said, hey, I want you to be my offensive coordinator. And at the time, Crowley was one school, it was 5A, the biggest classification at the time in Texas. Man, I was like, golly, man, this profession's easy. Man, I've been in it for 2 years, or 2.5 years. I'm fixing to be a coordinator. And, you know, I out of respect for Coach Wood, I went and interviewed at Cedar Hill. And I met 2 people, Holly Teague, who was the assistant superintendent, and Mike Hogan, who was the AD. And man, they just made me feel like Cedar Hill was the greatest place on earth. And I went home after that interview and I said, Debbie, you know, we're gonna have my wife, Debbie, I said, we're gonna have to pray about this because I don't know if I'm supposed to be at the crowd. And went to church on Sunday, and my pastor, Clayton Oliphant, preached a service on living life in fear or living life in faith. And my feeling was, if I stayed at Crowley, I was living in fear because I was living in my comfort zone. That was where I was from. I played there, and I didn't have to do any of the whenever I was preparing for class, it was all prepared because I knew all the teachers. I just would go in there and say, hey, like the curriculum that you're working on, give me everything. I didn't have to do any of that. And so it was really comfortable. It was very comfortable. And I think going to Cedar Hill was going to be uncomfortable and get me out of my comfort zone. And so, then I called Brad and called Coach Woods, and I said, man, I'm in. So I ended up going to Cedar Hill, and man, we weren't very good for 6 years. We only had one season out of the 6 years. We were 5-5, but I still learned so much in that time as an assistant there at Cedar Hill.
Yeah, and that that's so hard for me to hear at this point in time. Cedar Hill not being good. During that time frame, what were some of the lessons that you learned in regards to been a part of a new staff, coming and planting a seed there, because like you said, you were kind of in this comfort zone where people knew who you were for the most part, things like that. Now all of a sudden, you're kind of in a new environment, different demographic, all the different kind of things. What did you learn in that time frame as an assistant there?
I think the biggest thing is, being still, and growing versus like there's so many times right now in this profession, so many guys hop jobs, trying to find that one job, this job's better, that job's better, and especially as an assistant. I know as head coaches, it's a little bit different. I still think that head coaches, move around at different times too much, and sometimes we're moved not by us, but by just situations. But I think that was the one thing I learned, and then I think I needed to grow through a lot of adversity. I needed being a young coach. And we didn't win, and Cedar Hill was a basketball school. Cedar Hill didn't win a playoff game in 2006. Cedar Hill's played football since 1932, and so I think growing in a school that you had to really go in the hallways and recruit your players. You had to go down in the middle schools and make sure that they saw your face, and so I think, being in that situation, of going that route, really helped me grow instead of maybe going into a situation that, the program was already established, and established programs are still really hard.
Yeah.
Because you're dealing with teenagers, and now my dad always says my job security depends on, at the time he said, 15 to 18-year-olds, and now it's 18 to 22-year-olds, but it's still, that's what you're depending on. And so I think facing that adversity early in my career, and not just short-term adversity, that was a 6-year period to where, it really grew me as a coach.
And so in 2003, I don't know what the situation was with Coach Woods, but ultimately the opportunity opens up there at Cedar Hill. Just talk a little bit about that and how you ultimately ended up with the job.
And that was a scary time, as far as I love that place, but we had a new AD. She had been at Cedar Hill for a long time. She was a coach and then assistant principal and AD. Her first job as an AD, she's one of the first female ADs in the state of Texas. Tina Farmer, was to hire a new football coach. And, I was just expecting to either try to interview with a new coach or go find another job. I'd start putting out feelers around the Metroplex to possibly, moving on. And she and the assistant AD, Holly T, came to me and they said, we don't know if you're going to get this job. Now it's 31 years old. And you're probably not, but we want you to interview for this job. And I said, you do realize if I interview for this job and I don't get it, I'm probably not going to be able to stay here. And they say, well, we're okay with that, but we want you to interview for this job. Yeah. And, man, we went all in. I had a group of coaches, Carlos Lynn, he's the head coach at Crowley. Dave Martin is on my staff. He helps with safeties and he's a player development. I had a bunch of young coaches. I mean, we were young. We were a really young staff. And, man, we were like, they were, of the belief of, hey, we're going to get behind one guy, you're the guy, and we're all going to go try to get this job. And so, put a lot of work into that interview process. There's a guy in the Metroplex named Brian Arnold. He was a lawyer. He's a judge now. His son played for me, and we were extremely close. And I called him and I said, hey, I called one of my mentors, Dennis Harris, and I said, Coach Harris, I'm going to interview for the Cedar Hill job. And you told me at one point you had a folder with interview questions. And he said, I do. I'm going to fax them to you. And so he faxed me 75 questions. And I called Brian Arnold, he's the smartest guy I knew. And I said, Brian, if you would, if you believe in me being the head coach, then could you help me? And for a week, we met every night. And he prepared me for that interview. And so we had an interview. They were going to have 2 interviews. They ended up adding an interview. And I got to give a lot of credit to Carlos Lynn. I think I'm a PowerPoint expert now, but back then in 2003, whenever most people didn't even know what that was, he was a PowerPoint expert. And after the first interview, they added a football interview, and we put together what we were going to do as a program in a PowerPoint. And man, I think just the initiative with that and just the stuff really showed who we were going to be. And so, man, we get to the third interview with the superintendent, and they take my name to the board. And man, it's a cool story because all the players showed up to the board meeting.
Yeah.
And to support me. And when they called the vote, all the players put their hand up. And they were calling the vote to support me. And so, man, I ended up getting the job. And you know, I always think Gina Farmer. You know, my 2 ADs, Gina Farmer and Kirby Holcutt, they have the most guts, I think, because one, Gina hired a 31-year-old that had never been a head football coach. I've been head coach of other sports, but never as a head football coach in a 5A school at Cedar Hill. And then Kirby Holcutt hires me at Texas Tech, and I'd never been a Division I head coach. You know, and it took faith and belief in hiring me. And so I give Gina and I are really close. We talked yesterday. She sent me a book on leadership, and we're really close. And so in 2003, I was the youngest high school coach in the state of Texas, and man, didn't know come here from Sikkim. I was drinking out of a water hose. But we knew what we were going to do. We were going to have a lot of energy. I can tell you this: my players in 2003 and my players in 2026, they get the same dude every single day.
Yeah.
You know, at 31 and 54, they still get the same guy energy-wise every single day. And so, man, we went at it and really changed the place, you know, that had never won.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm going to brag on you here in a second, but I do want to ask, like, you know, the real fact in this whole deal is that, I mean, you were a varsity coach with no experience. I mean, I believe you went to UTA. They didn't have a football program. So you almost walk in here, no experience. You're a varsity coach very quickly, have a significant impact enough where they want you to be the OC prior to leaving the Cedar Hill. You're there for, 4 to 5 years. What, once again, we're trying to give advice vicariously through you. What is it that you were doing to make her call you up and say, hey, you're probably not going to get the job, but I want to interview you? What were you doing in those hallways and those interactions with other staff members and things like that to be able to, be called upon to at least interview?
Well, one, man, everybody knows it's a profession. You don't punch time clock. You got to be willing to, put in the hours. Number two, I've always been in belief that you connect with every single player.
Yeah.
And so I was connecting from 7th grade to seniors. I went to all the basketball games. If we had a player that played, I went to all the track meets. I was coaching powerlifting. It's just something. It's the same thing we do here at Tech, my wife and I. And my wife probably goes to more sporting events than she does, but most everybody. She goes to women's basketball, men's basketball, softball, baseball. We were doing that, but we were connecting and being a part of the community.
Yeah.
I spoke to every parent. I did not ever avoid speaking to people, so I think there was, whenever Gina saw that the connection, I think as a head coach, you got to be a connector. You got to be able to connect with everybody on that team. You got to be able to connect with everybody in that building. I always talked about like the people that invest time in your players. You better know who those people are. And so I was doing that as an assistant. And so I think they saw that in me, that I was going to, what was needing to happen in that community, was somebody that could connect with everybody and bring that community together. And so that was the one thing I think that's really important, man. You've got to connect. It's got to become that everybody's all in this together, and they got to feel that.
No doubt about it. Well, obviously, it will be a lot to cover all the individual things, but I'm going to run through a quick list here. 2013 Texas Coach of the Year by Max Preps. 2013 Coach of the Year honors, Class 5A, two-time District Coach of the Year, head coach of the I'm going to butcher that name, the All-America Bowl, 2014 THA SCA All-Star Game, won 3 state champions. I could kind of keep rattling off on all these accolades, 141 and 42 record as a head ball coach. And the funny part is I'm saying all this as to about a 31-year-old guy who just said he was drinking out of a fire hose. And I think within about it was 06, the first state champion. I didn't put the dates on here. Was it 06?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so in 3.
That was the first playoff one. That was the first playoff game ever won. We went 16-0. So we won the first one and we won every one after that, and that was the first time in the history of Cedar Hill football that we'd ever won a playoff game.
So you get named head coach, and essentially, were the freshmen, were those your seniors in that game, or were those
my baby?
Those were your seniors, okay. And so
56 of them. I had 56 that had been with me for 4 years.
Yeah, and you kind of get to see the fruits of your labor, the fruits of probably some late nights trying to figure this whole thing out. Rolling to a state championship. What was kind of the shift to be able to bring success and sustain success, not only to the program. I mean, Duncanville was winning some state championships, I think in early 2000, late 90s, but just to that area. I mean, if you're a coach and you're recruiting Dallas-Fort Worth, you're going to go sit in that South Dallas area, and largely a part to you and some of the other coaches that were around that area at the time. What was that big change for that program though?
And, it was, it's really interesting. So whenever I got the job, we had a really strong senior class. We just didn't know how to win, but we ended up going 6-4. We won our very last game to have a winning record in the first time in like 10 years. We beat the number 9 team in the state. They were undefeated at the time. Mansfield Summit, Tim Beck, who's, been a head coach at this level and he's an offense coordinator. Loved Tim. That was a big moment. But I will tell you, my second year, we went 5-5. I went into my AD's office and I said, please don't fire me. I promise we're going to get this thing turned. And there was a moment, I've had these moments throughout my career, but there literally was a moment at the end of that year that I was like, man, I don't know if I'm supposed to be a head coach. Like, can I do this? And I sit down with Richard Leonard. He was my O-line coach. He's the head coach at Ranchview now. And I said, man, we're doing some really good things, and we have to make a change in this offseason. We have got to change what we're doing. And he said, well, man, there's a guy at Raleigh, Cliff Harden, that they do a boot camp, and all boot camps originate from Converse Justin. All boot camps originate from D.W. Rutledge and his crew. And I said, well, let's go watch them. So I called. We had played Raleigh in 03 and 04, so I knew Kip. And so I called Kip and I said, hey, do you mind if we come over and watch your boot camp? And he was like, oh, come on. And man, that really was the shift of we called our phases controlled chaos, and that controlled chaos went into boot camp, which was a true military style discipline. And the next year, it was very, very different. Nobody was doing anything like that in that area. And of course, nobody had done anything like that in Cedar Hill. And our kids bought into that it was different, and they were built different.
Yeah.
And we ended up winning the district championship for the first time in like 25 years that next year in 05. And that just, you know, the 05 team was really good. We got beat in the first round. So again, we don't win a playoff game, but we get beat by Allen. You know, we should have won the game, but Tom Westerberg found a way to get us. But we had 18 starters coming back off of that team, and we knew we were going to be really, really good. And we caught lightning in a bottle with a great team and one of the greatest high school players in the history of Texas high school football, and Will Cole at quarterback. And man, just took off from there. And I'm really fortunate again. You know, I told you I've worked, but like some of my mentors, Skip Harden has a huge fingerprint on Cedar Hill, but he has a huge fingerprint on Texas Tech.
Yeah.
Mike Copeland was the defensive coordinator at Stephenville whenever Art Browse won all his state championships at Stephenville. I visited Stephenville every summer for 8 years and met with Mike Copeland for 8 years talking football and growth. He has a huge fingerprint. And then, you know, the other guy is Sam Harrell at Ennis. We scrimmaged Sam, I think 6 or 8 years in a row. And I learned so much from Coach Harrell. And so guys that I didn't coach with, but I you know, tried to pick their brain that had such high success, man, really would help me turn and help us. Because the other part, I was there as a head coach for 14 years, unless our coaches went on to be coordinators or head coaches. And for the majority of my coaches, we were together for 14 years. So we had continuity at Cedar Hill. And man, once we got it turned, there was no looking back, man. There was no looking back.
Well, you said something super interesting there. Like, you know, I've been doing this podcast since like 2018, and obviously have the opportunity to get a lot of coaches on here to, you know, tell their story and talk about mentorship, mentee relationship. And, you know, some of these guys who have done, you know, impressive things in the profession, they just had the opportunity to be around fantastic, legendary head coaches and things like that. And you did in your own right with Coach Woods. But that's really, I won't say that's it, because I don't know who else you kind of touched there, you know, that had some impacts on you directly. But what's really impressive is that, you know, there was no ego, pride for you to say, hey, in this scrimmage, you're going to kick my butt sometimes I'm going to kick your butt, but I'm learning something from you that's going to make me a better coach. Where you just don't really see that in the profession where, hey, we're struggling. I'm going to get in my vehicle, drive over here to a team we just played in Rowlett and go and figure out what they're doing. Yeah, just very quickly, because we got a lot of your career left, and I still want to make sure I can tap on all of it. You know, how did you put? I don't know if you even know if it's really putting your ego to the side, but how did you know that's something that you needed to go do at 32, 33 years old when you were 5-5 and kind of hitting that fork in the road a little bit?
You know, I think one of the things, one, because Gina took Miss Farmer took such a chance on me, that I was by any means figure this thing out. Like, I did not want to let her down. Yeah. And so I think that was one thing of, you know, pulling that ego back. And then the other thing, one thing I tell coaches, man, find coaches, like, one, retired coaches are awesome.
Yeah. Oh, they'll tell you everything. Yeah.
Nelly has a huge fingerprint on Texas Tech. Rob Marinelli is one of the, if not the greatest defensive line coach ever to coach football. And my coaches, I had 4 go meet with him for as long as he would meet last week. TJIU did the same thing the last couple of years. And so, one, finding really good retired coaches, because, man, they want to talk ball,
yeah.
and you're not playing. 2, one thing I try to do is find guys maybe like, you know, guys that maybe I wasn't going to play or they weren't going to play us. It would be really honest, you know, and open up. And then, man, I just was one of those deals, man. Like I knew I didn't have all the answers, so I had to go find guys that did it. I wanted to find guys that had done it at the highest level that would really pour into what we were trying to do. And so I'm a football geek, man. I love this game, and man, I love the history of the game and everything that it stands for. And so I tried to find the guys. And you got to think, Skip Barton, before he got to Rowlett, he was an extremely successful coach. And, like Coach Copeland, they won 4 state championships. To see him as a defense coordinator, and Sam Harrell, I think he won 4 state championships also, maybe more than that. Has 5. But, I mean, I wanted to find guys that had done it at the highest level that were willing to give me everything they had.
And you were willing to receive it. That's awesome. The last thing, and this is actually in a question, but I do want to tap on it, is, one of the coolest things I remember is my first collegiate job was at Texas A&M Commerce, and I was signed to go recruit Dallas-Fort Worth area, and I rolled into old Cedar Hill, and it was every college coach in the dang country, it felt like, in there, and I'm wearing this little logo, and that was kind of my first taste of kind of, big time recruiting, a stop where you guys had a lot of guys, where you can go find some talent, some guys that are college ready, academically, obviously physically, and football acumen, all those kind of things. And as I was kind of doing some of this homework, I saw an amazing number. Like during that time frame, I think it was around 100 Division I players kind of came through under your tenure. It's like almost 10 draft picks, and then obviously tons of guys that made camps and ultimately made rosters. I don't know if that's something you set your eyes on when you're 31 years old and you're just trying to win a ball game. But by the end of it, you had built something special, not just for Cedar Hill, I guess, in regards to win-loss column, but for kids to have an opportunity to go and play college football from coast to coast. Just talk a little bit about that impact in the recruiting space, because ultimately I think this has a pretty significant impact on you ultimately been moved up in the college level and all those kind of things as well.
Well, I'll tell you this, I don't know if I'm a good coach, but I can get you on the butt. That was one thing. I had some dudes at Cedar Hill, man. Those guys were just incredible. But one thing. So you take over a program that hadn't won, but they're winning in basketball. David Milson, I think, won 700. He's passed away. He's another one of my mentors. And most football coaches don't have basketball mentors, especially at the same school that you're coaching at, right? And you're competing for kids.
Right.
And he's one of my mentors. And, the one thing I knew, in order to compete with what he was doing, I had to get guys recruited. I had to get guys. And so I think we were one of the first. We weren't the first, so I don't want to take that credit, but we were one of the first that had a true spreadsheet. We found some scale. I don't even know where we found this scale. And it was a ranking from like 1 to 6. And for instance, if it was a Division I player, top player, like a Thomas Ashcraft that played at Texas, or an Adam Shedd that played at OU, he would be a number 1. He was a top 100 player in the state of Texas. And, we wanted to be extremely honest. We were extremely honest with the players, coaches, and parents of what we felt and how we evaluated the players. But like when these coaches walked in, we handed them. I mean, 2003, as soon as we got the job, we created this spreadsheet and we handed it to coaches. We felt like we were extremely organized. We had transcripts. We had everything ready for you guys to go. And so, once we started, I'll never forget, we get ready to play North Carolina State, Dave Dorn. And, I'm talking about Dave in the press conference, and I give him a lot of credit for the success, because Dave was at Kansas, and he was the first guy to offer a Cedar Hill kid under my coaching. It was Marcus Perkins.
Yeah.
And I said, Dave changed everything, because Marcus Perkins was a really good basketball player. And he was being recruited by like Division III, Division II, JUCO basketball. And so I was able to tell these other basketball players, so, hey man, are you as good as Marcus? And then they go, no, Marcus is better than me. They're like, well, he can't even get a Division I scholarship in basketball. but he did in football. And so then all these kids started getting them to play both. Man, people don't believe me, but man, I walked into Cedar Hill my first interview and I couldn't get into the front door. There was a door propped open. And so I went through the basketball gym. This is where I'm interviewing for Cedar Hill as an assistant. And all these guys are in there and I'm like, oh, moly, man, these dudes are freaks. I walk up to the basketball coach, the assistant. I said, who all these guys play football? He goes, Coach, these guys don't play football. Let's play basketball. And I was like, what? Like there's 5 linebackers out here that would be full scholarships to anywhere they wanted to go, and so that was the thing that we had to do. Well, how do you do that? You show parents that they're going to be recruited.
Absolutely.
And and we did, man. Our kids were academically ready to go. I mean, I had guys that graduated from the Naval Academy. I had guys that graduated from the Air Force Academy. I had guys that graduated from Georgetown, from Fordham, and I've had guys that graduated from Texas and Oregon and Ole Miss and everywhere else, all across the country. That our guys were ready. Academically, there wasn't questions whenever it came to our guys being ready to go to at the college level. So the college coaches really appreciated that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Now, 2017 came around. I'm a Baylor alum. Matt Rule gets hired. Obviously me being in the profession, I know how talented and what kind of guy he is. On the flip side of it, we need some Texas roots and all these kind of things. All this stuff start popping up, and then your name starts popping up, and a few guys kind of around the state. What's going on in your head at this point in time where you've built just this behemoth of a program, and I can see it as I'm talking to you how proud you are of just all the relationships built and everything that you were able to accomplish there. But I believe you got a son that's a junior, senior, maybe at this point in time that's played for the program. What are all the thoughts that kind of go into you making such a significant leap at this point in time?
Well, let me go back for 2 things. One, from 2006 to 2016, I had at least one offer to go coach college football.
Wow.
And, I went and interviewed for Tulsa at one time. Keith Patterson didn't go to A&M, so there wasn't a job there. I almost left for Texas with Charlie, but I wanted to coach my daughter and my son, and so I stayed. The second thing, and you led to it. The one thing, we ended up getting a very good reputation on being extremely honest with college coaches. But the other thing that I did is I tried to help every high school player in that area, and especially the ones that we played against, that to help them get recognized. So I'll give you an example. Kennedy Brooks, who I think is one of the best high school running backs I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Kennedy Brooks, his sophomore year, had no offers and had a good year. This is in the middle of the year. He played us. I think he rushed for like 300 yards. And every coach that came in after that game, I told him, if you do not go to Manchester and go see Kennedy Brooks, and if you do not offer him a scholarship, you do not love your job. Like literally, Kennedy. It's funny, Kennedy, after the fact, years later, would say, Coach, you don't know how many people came up to me and said, Coach McGuire said I needed to go see. So I was trying to do that. Well, where that helped me is Fran Brown. Matt Rule gets hired. Fran Brown is the assistant head coach, secondary coach. He lands in, when you land in Dallas-Fort Worth, probably some of the first at that time, you go see Trinity, you go see LD Bell, you go see South Lake Carroll. They're all right there by the airport. Yeah. And he said, his deal to me, whenever I finally met him, he said, yeah, after about 3 schools, I called Coach Rule and he said, I don't know who this Joey McGuire is, but we need to call him. Because every school I go into, they say, have you gone to Cedar Hill yet? And his point was, look, Cedar Hill's got all these players. I mean, at the time, I had Charleston Rambo, who went to OU, Avery Davis, who went to Notre Dame, Cam Buckley, who went to A&M. And I had dudes that year. And he said, I'm going by there, but they said, I'm wasting my time if I don't go there first, because he's going to tell me where to go and who to see. And so he goes, well, find his number and get it to me. So Coach Rule called me on a Friday. No, he called me on a Wednesday and he said, hey, I would love to talk to you about coming to Baylor. And at that time, it was my son's senior year. We were getting ready to play DeSoto in the 4th round. And I knew I had started to feel that everything was about to change. As far as he wasn't going to be there anymore. Yeah. You know, he's going to Texas. He was walking home with Coach Herman. And so I was open to, like, I'm fixed to start interviewing. I'm fixed to see if I can get a job. And so I told him, I said, hey, Coach, we had just got beat by DeSoto. I said, hey, Coach, he said, can I interview on Friday? And I said, Coach, can we do it Saturday or Sunday or Monday? Dave Martin, who's on my staff, we had a rule. Whoever got beat out in the playoffs had to cross the Red River. He was the head coach in Jones, Oklahoma, his home school. And he was playing for the state championship on Friday night. And I said, man, Coach, I promised I would be there for that game. And he said, okay, let's get together on Sunday. He said, what's the midpoint between Midlothian and Waco? I said, Hillsboro. So we met at an IHOP in Hillsboro for breakfast and went through about 5 pots of coffee and 3 hours of an interview. And I walked out of that interview and I called my wife and I said, hey, listen, if Matt Rules offers us a job, we're going to Baylor. And it was the best decision I've ever made in my life. And I had other opportunities to go other places, but it was the best decision. It changed my life, and it changed not only my life, but it changed my family, but it really changed my son, who all his entire life knew he wanted to be a coach. But going to Baylor also changed his career trajectory also.
Yeah. Well, you know, one of the interesting things here, and I got an eye on the time here, Coach, so I know we got a couple minutes left, but yeah, this was a
I could probably push my meeting a little bit.
You think so? Okay. All right. Awesome. You just give me the wink or something like that and let me know when I need to start shutting down, and we'll do so, because I definitely want to tap into this question for sure. Once again, been a Baylor alum. Obviously, this was an extremely turbulent time in kind of Baylor's football history. You know, Coach Brown's staff had just let go, and it's an ESPN scandal, and, you know, blah, 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 blah. And, you know, I know just knowing you over the years, you're a strong man of faith and all that kind of stuff. You know, what were there red flags about taking a job like this at this point in time with just all the hoopla and all the things kind of going on around it, and the kids exiting the program, things like that?
Well, you know, I was really fortunate because some of the guys on that staff I knew really, really well. You know, Jeff, I love Jeff, head coach at Mississippi State.
Yep.
And I called Jeff, and he just could not say, even at that time, he couldn't say enough good things about the opportunity that, you know, as tough as it was going to be to get turned, and overcome some stuff, it was a great place. You know, and I'm telling you, man, no matter what, that first meeting with Matt Rule, he sold me. I knew he was the guy. Mm. And I wanted to be a part of that. Yeah. You know, so that had such a big decision on that like that. That had a huge decision on just believing in Coach Rule.
Yeah. One of the things I've always found interesting, you know, once again, doing these podcasts it's guys oftentimes, and you said this early in your career, you knew you wanted to be a head ball coach. You knew you wanted to be sitting in that chair, kind of, you know, manufacturing schedules, you know, mapping out, been organized, all those kind of things. And a lot of guys talk about how difficult it is when you step out of that chair and go back to kind of that assistant role. Just talk a little bit about that first year. It was a tough season. I believe Baylor won one game. You know, you're dealing with your own, stepping away from a program, things like that. You know, what was kind of going on with you in regards to not sitting in that head chair anymore?
Well, you know, I'll never forget one of the last questions Coach Rule asked me was, hey, you've been a head coach for the last 14 years. I mean, this is going to be tough. And I always joke. I always say, look, you know, I have a principal that I answer to. I have an AD that I answer to, a superintendent I answer to, and I have a wife that I answer to. And so, you know, I can be a good, definitely a good servant, but I could be a good follower. And And so it was one of those deals. I think because it was such a shift in what I was doing, that there was so much growth that had to happen with me, that it was a lot easier to take a step back and knew there were so many things that I didn't know, and it had nothing to do with X's and O's and everything like that. It was just the college game and recruiting and home visits and, just everything and how you organize your day and going back and thinking about all the good recruiters that came through Cedar Hill and the ones that were average and the ones that weren't very good, the things that they did well and didn't do. And so there was so much growth that had to happen that I think it was easier to take a step back and not be the head coach at that point.
Yeah, no doubt. And, I do have to mention this. I remember we got a guy that was as thin as a pole, named Josh Allen from old Cedar Hill, and you promised he was going to be a heck of a player. He ended up being one of the best offensive linemen, if not the best offensive lineman, come through that program, play in the league for a little bit, all those kind of things. Yeah. So clearly it's no doubt. I mean, just incredible. And one of the things that you had this eye for is to be able to project and like you said, stand on the table. You were always so honest. Like, we made a bet on that dude, and he ended up being really, really good for us. Having that experience of recruiting, and like you said, pointing out Kennedy Brooks and kids at other programs, how helpful was that for you? As all of a sudden now you're on the opposite end of all this. You're going to walk into school and they're, coach trying to sell you on a kid, and you have this eye or this gift to be able to kind of project and see talent. How helpful was that?
Yeah, I think it was really helpful, and it was doing it the first time. I was really comfortable, because on the other end of it. But there was also a level that I really needed to learn, because the one thing that we always talk about is, there are exceptions to the rule, but you can't have a team full of exceptions, or you're not going to have a job for very long. I always mention Wes Welker and say, man, everybody's the next Wes Welker. I love Wes, but there's only one Wes Welker. That's right. There's big guys that's similar and everything, but like Wes is different. And so that was another thing that, I had to really learn. What did a Baylor football player look like under Matt Rule? How were we going to develop these guys? What we were looking for. Not just what I thought was a good player, because there was there was plenty of disagreements and who was good and who wasn't good and who we thought we should take. There's plenty of those disagreements, but I needed to learn what a Baylor football player looked like under Matt Rule. Yeah. I think that's a big thing as far as the recruiting process I have involved.
And I want to ask you this too. After kind of rattling off that list of accolades that you were able to accomplish there at Cedar Hill and all the success, I mean, you're 4 rounds deep playing DeSoto as you ultimately kind of starting this dialogue. Next thing you know, a year later, you're I think 1-10 at this point in time. AFCA is right down the way. I think I saw y'all's cars there 4:30 and 12:30 at night is in some occasions you're trying to get it together. As you all of a sudden are in this position now where, things are challenging. I know you guys never approached the game as you could roll your helmet out there and win the game, but in many ways, man, you guys were just so dominant. Now all of a sudden you're in a situation where you're trying to figure this thing out. What was the adjustment like to kind of getting back to that world of, hey, I'm drinking out of a fire hose again. Our program is, and we're trying to figure this thing out.
I think one thing that, and that's what we try to do here. The one thing I learned, I think one thing I always say about Coach Rule, he does a great job of defining, what's important. And so even though we're getting beat, we're 1-11, we're in a lot of games. The only game that we really got boat race was Oklahoma State that year in Stillwater. And so I could see the plan and the players, even though we weren't winning, they still were believing that we were developing, and you could see through what he was trying to do, because you're good different is not good or bad. Different.
Yeah.
But you can't have more of a different style than Matt Rule and Art Brown.
Yeah.
I've known Brown since 1988. And, I've worked for Matt Rule. Different's different. It's not good or bad. It's different. So it was also a shift with those players understanding, this is what the football is going to look like under Coach Rule. And so I think him being able to define that and really, he would just keep talking about building relationships through this hard time. Keep bringing these guys together. Keep knowing your players. Keep digging into what they were doing. Help them be successful in, academically, everything. Just find the little things that we could win at to just build that winning. And that was a big part of that year, man. I grew so much that year why I'm here, where I'm at now. But man, that was painful. That was one of the tough years, man.
Yeah.
The 14 years previous, the worst record was 5-5. I'd never been a part of, losing since for, 14 years. And so that was tough to go, you go 1-11 and you feel like you're not seeing it, but you really are. Like it was still, the guys were growing.
Yeah. Just what's cool to kind of hear from my end on this deal is, that year you're 5-5 and you're hitting up your AD at Cedar Hill saying, hey, please don't fire me. Like, clearly that was a huge year of growth for you to be able to kind of reach out and kind of expand your network and go and tap in other programs. And once again, you're 1-11 and you're talking about just how much of a pivotal and growth year impacting you, doing such a good job and winning the Big 12 here at Texas Tech, a few years later. You snap your fingers just like that. You guys are playing in the Sugar Bowl down in New Orleans. Just talk about the turnaround, your growth at the collegiate level from year 1 to year 2. The things that you're able to learn and pull away from Coach Rule as, here inevitably you're going to come take this Texas Tech job shortly after that.
One thing through that 1-11, we recruited a really strong freshman class, and it wasn't a star class. It wasn't like a high ranked class, but it had Terrell Bernard in that class. It had Jalen Teacher in that class, who both have signed their second
contracts.
Yeah. Xavier Newman, he's still in the NFL. Yeah. Tristan, out of Henderson, those guys, like that freshman class, and they had to play as freshmen. That was a really strong class. So you fast forward, to 2019 and even 2021, those dudes have been through the fire.
Yeah.
And people forget I'm actually having my guy cut up the 2019 first OU game to prove some points. We're going to watch it as a coaching staff when we come back. People forget Baylor. We get beat by OU. We're both undefeated, 34-31, and then we get beat in overtime in the Big 12 championship. Well, we're playing. Now, we wouldn't have beat them because LSU is one of the greatest college football teams of all time in 2019.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely one of the greatest of all time to play with anybody. We would have been in that spot instead of OU. So you're going from 1-11 to in 2017 to 2019, and you're an overtime game away from probably playing in the Final Four. And so there was it was a turnaround of great belief and a lot of work and players really buying in to becoming great football players. I mean, I'm going to tell you, being a part of that too has made a huge impact. Like Jalen Petrie, during spring football, he zoomed with all the safeties and corners. Terrell Bernard, he zoomed with all the linebackers and anybody else that wanted to. And those are my dudes.
Yeah.
They're guys. And so, having been part of those guys, was huge, to be able to be a part of that 2019 and then turning around and 2020 during COVID, having a really tough year, winning 2 games and then winning the Big 12 a year later.
Yeah.
Being a part made such a huge impact on where I'm at right now.
Absolutely. And I had the opportunity to work under 2 different coaches there during that time frame. Had two Big 12 championship appearances, one walking out as the winner. And then 2021 comes around, and here you are again, sitting in the AD's office, trying to get a job. Why were you the guy? Why did Kirby feel like he needed to call you up to at least give you a shot to interview? Why, this point in time, you've obviously done a tremendous job at the high school level. You came and made a tremendous impact here. I say this, and we can talk about it. We don't have to talk about it, but you're talking about that deal where all your players were raising their hand for you to get that job, and I'm part of the Baylor Letterman's Club. I know there's a lot of people you really wanting you to come be the head coach here at Baylor. At least taking an opportunity, and then all of a sudden you're sitting there at Texas Tech with the opportunity there. Why were you the guy?
I think they were looking for a Texas connection. I think they were looking for a recruiter, a guy that could really recruit. So I think that really, helped at least me get my name in for an interview. I was very aggressive of trying to get this job. I called Kirby, about getting an interview. I called Cody Campbell about getting an interview before, and then I think I talked to Cody after Kirby told me, hey, you're going to be interviewed. And I knew I was going to meet with the interview committee, and Cody was on it. But I called Cody to get him to understand, man. I'm a Texan. I ain't been anywhere else. I'll never be anywhere.
Yeah.
And, I've got a lot of connections at Texas Tech. If I hadn't met my wife, I would have come out here my junior year. I was getting ready to transfer to Tech. My best friend played for Spike. And so I have a lot of connections to Tech. And I love Lubbock. I knew that it would be a really good fit for me and Debbie to be here. And I also knew that they were ready. Like it was, did I picture it as it is right now? No. I would be lying to you if I said that. But I did know that they were ready to really put some things behind this program to get it going in the direction. And so, anytime you have an AD that plays high school and college football, Kirby played at Sherman, and he's a Bearcat, and then he went and played at K-State. Anytime you have that, anytime on the interview committee, you have a former player. We had a couple former players, Sammy Morris and Cody Campbell. You had guys in that room that get it.
Yeah.
And that was a big part of wanting to get this job.
Yeah. Well, in the first 4 years there at Cedar Hill, you winning the state championship, winning playoff games, kind of in your first 4 seasons, Texas Tech come Big 12 championship, reached college football playoff, kind of established very similar success on a platform that, especially now more than ever, couldn't be more different. But there are some similarities there, right? What were some of the things you honed in, from your experience in those first couple of years at Cedar Hill that proven to be successful for you there at Tech?
Yeah, Gina Farmer, another great mentor, my AD. The one thing she told me really early in my career, whenever I would come in there and be stressed out about stuff, and she always said, Joey, if you make the decision with the player first, then you're hardly ever going to be wrong. If you put the player first, they're always the focus. And so Coach Rule is the same way. And I always tell everybody, the most important thing we have in this building are our players. And if you don't know that and you don't believe in that, then you can't work at Texas Tech. And so I brought that with me, here. We're very player focused and centered in every aspect of their life, and trying to help them become better men and deal with the situations they deal with, and help them become better football players. The better man, you usually can get them to be a better football faster. So helping them to grow.
Yeah.
And we tried to do it at Cedar Hill, and so we were able to bring that. And I could see there were so many similarities with Coach Rule and what he was doing at Baylor and what I was doing at Cedar Hill, that it helped me know that it could work at this level.
Absolutely.
And so it just reinforced the things that I believed in.
Yeah. Well, Coach, hey, I appreciate you carving out some extra time. I know you had some, and I appreciate you bumping in. I did have that one question I wanted to ask you. Obviously, the profession is kind of crazy as it's ever been right now, and a lot of things going on. You were recently named to the AFCA Board of Trustees. Just right now, with so much going on, and why did you feel like this was an important role for you to kind of step into?
Well, whenever Craig, Coach Bowles, he kicked my butt. He always says he won in double overtime. He still won. He kicked my butt. I got to meet him, and we just hit it off. We really did. And whenever he was named to the AFCA, I called him and congratulated him. But I called him and I said, hey, look, football has given me everything. Everything I have in this life is because of football. It's a great game. And I said, I believe we got to protect it. I said, I'm very opinionated, and I am. Sometimes I talk way too much, and probably need to listen a lot more. And we're in some of different meetings, and we got our Big 12 meetings coming up, and I imagine some of those coaches are like, God dang, man, is McGuire ever going to shut up? I'm very opinionated, but what I told Coach Bowles, I said, look, I'm very opinionated, but I believe that if you are going to be opinionated, you cannot be that dude that doesn't try to fix the things that you think's wrong or things are going the wrong direction. So I told him, I said, listen, if there is anything you ever need, if you want to put me on any committee, I don't care what committee it is. I mean, whatever committee it is, whatever is going on, Coach, I'm not going to be the guy that gripes about stuff and then doesn't do anything about it. We have too many coaches right now that have an opinion, that have a platform, but then they're not doing anything about it. They're just griping about it. And so whenever Coach asked me to be, I was on the rules committee and been on a couple of different things. Whenever he asked about the board, man, I jumped all over it because, one, I was on the board of directors at CHSCA, and it was the greatest honor. And again, I learned so much. I learned so much and met so many great coaches, that changed my life. I mean, shoot, John Snelson at Dickinson is one of my favorite people. He sends me something every single morning to encourage me. Every single morning. That doesn't happen if I'm not on the board.
Yeah.
And it's the same way I thought it whenever the AFCA is. Number one, if I'm going to gripe about stuff, and I need to be a part of trying to help the game. And then two, I know I'm going to get to learn. And give you an example. Clark Lee at Vandy. I've just been so impressed with him in the couple of board meetings that I've been a part of. And he and I were able at the board meeting, able to have dinner and sit down and just talk about different things. And I'm a football geek. I'm a culture geek. I just want to absorb what people are doing at a really high level. And that guy's doing it at a high level. He's doing it at a point that it hadn't been done, at the level he's doing it at. So I wouldn't be able to get to know him if I wasn't on the board. So there's so many things whenever Coach asked me to be a part of it, man, I jumped all over it.
Well, we appreciate you jumping all over that, Coach. I certainly appreciate you once again bumping that time back and spending this hour with us today. And the crazy thing is we probably could go for another hour because I still got a ton of questions. So we had to do a part 2 at some point in time here in a couple of years or so. All right, Coach. Well, I'll let you get back to it, man. Thanks so much for what you do. Me being a DFW kid, what you've done for that area, what you're doing, what you're able to kind of accomplish at my alma mater, and then kind of what you're doing to put the Big 12 back on the main stage and all those good things. So once again, appreciate you, Coach, and wishing you the best of luck, okay?
All right, man. Thanks very much.
Yes, sir.
Welcome.
All right. Have a good one, Coach. Later.
When communication counts, trust the headsets trusted by the best. From high schools to the biggest college programs, CoachComm keeps coaches connected and teams prepared to win. Learn more at CoachComm.com.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Inside the Headset, presented by CoachComm. If you'd like to learn more about this week's episode, head over to AFCA.com. There, you can access every episode and find corresponding show notes. Remember, you can catch every episode of Inside the Headset, presented by CoachComm, on wherever you get your podcasts, including Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. While you're there, we'd love for you to take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Your feedback helps us improve and grow. Keep up with the latest news by following us on social media. Connect with us at Inside the Headset, and remember to tag us when you share your favorite episodes. For more updates on all things AFCA, be sure to follow the @WeAreAFCA social media accounts. If you're not a part of the AFCA community yet, Visit AFCA.com to join thousands of NFL, college, and high school coaches nationwide and across the globe. Elevate your coaching game with an AFCA membership. You'll gain exclusive access to the annual AFCA convention, magazine, digital library, and AFCA Insider email. Stay up to date with the latest stories and news on the AFCA website. More than just a convention, the AFCA offers continuous education, guidance, networking, and more. Celebrate the past and shape the future with the AFCA. It's about fostering exceptional coaches who create outstanding teams and even better individuals. Invest in your skills and make a lasting impact today by engaging with the AFCA. Your journey starts here.